Beijing 2022. Human rights on ice.
Since the start of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, we have been devoting this special segment each day to highlight some of the atrocities being carried out by the Chinese Communist Party. Today, for Human Rights on Ice, we're going to discuss something that may make it harder to sleep at night: the Chinese Communist Party's harvesting of organs. Joining me now to talk about this is Ethan Gutmann. He's the investigative reporter and author of The Slaughter: Mass Killings, Organ Harvesting, and China's Secret Solution to Its Dissident Problem. And Ethan joins us from Istanbul. Ethan, thank you so much for staying up and being with us tonight and for you this morning. Welcome back to Washington Watch.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Well, we are glad to have you. It's not a fun story, but it's an important story. Based on your research, what are your thoughts as you watch the Olympic developments?
I don't watch it, to be honest. My wife complains about that. She says I ought to be looking at it, but I'm really, I'll take a look at some of the propaganda later. My interest right now is in exposing this problem, as it has been for some years. You know, this started with the Uyghurs, the organ harvesting. It began with live organ harvesting in Xinjiang in 1994 and 1995. And then the first people who were harvested, the first political or religious prisoners who were harvested, who were Uyghurs, and they were harvested on behalf of high-ranking Chinese Communist Party cadres who would come in to get kidneys or livers.
Ethan, tell us a bit more about that, if you would. When we think about organ harvesting, but if this is a system that the government's running, what's the motivation? Is this profit?
Yes, but if you follow the history of Marxism, you know that they can chew gum and walk at the same time, and so there's often a profit motive and an ideological motive at the same time. That's precisely what we're seeing here. You can see that with the destruction of the kulaks in the Stalin period. The same kind of thing. In this case, there is a very strong profit motive because sold to a foreign organ tourist, a healthy 28-year-old or 29-year-old can be worth about $500,000 to $1 million. That is, each individual organ is, if you put them all together and you can get them to the right people, you can make that kind of money off it.
And Ethan, another question here. To be clear, does this result in the death of the people who are having these organs taken from them against their will?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. You can't live without a heart, you can't live without lungs, you can't live without even 2 kidneys, and you can't live without a liver. You can live without your 2 corneas, but they're not really organs; they're tissues. But you see the point. These people are destroyed, and that's why most of this takes place inside China. It does not take place outside of China. We don't have real evidence that they're flying these organs around, but that may be happening. But we are talking about the destruction of people, and I think the only person who can say this, based on my field research in Kazakhstan, which was extensive, there's it's 25,000 to 50,000 Uyghurs that are being harvested every year.
It's a totally disturbing number, and you're right. I don't think people have an awareness that this is happening. Does the Chinese government deny this, or do they even bother to respond? What's their response to these allegations?
When they're most of the time they don't respond, and they haven't felt they've needed to, because they had for a long time, until quite recently, they had groups like the World Health Organization carrying their water, running interference for them. Sometimes they get groups like that to respond. They even get groups like the Transplantation Society, an international group of revered surgeons, to respond in some cases and say, well, we think that problem's ending, or China has reformed, or those kinds of things. So it's not really about the response. It's about getting the evidence. And the most difficult thing is that China has made it so difficult to find the refugees now that basically what used to be human rights work has become a form of spycraft.
Is this on the United States government's radar? Are they responding specifically and dealing specifically with these concerns?
Well, under Pompeo, they certainly were. And this was an issue that was growing and moving very well. And of course, Congress has been fairly bipartisan in responding to China. And that's what we hope will happen now. It's true that the Secretary of State Blinken has not been terribly responsive to this issue. I'd like to give all sorts of excuses. They're still new. It's just a year in, that kind of thing. But the fact is, it's a shame that you have to kind of start over from scratch with every new administration. Pompeo was right there with us and realized this was going on and seen the evidence and looked at the evidence on his staff and read through a lot
Ethan
of
Gutmann,
research.
We are unfortunately out of time for tonight. We do need to cover this again, but the clock is hard. But thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you sharing this important topic.